Hello and welcome back to my channel, Literary Lauren. Today I am taking you through a day in my life as a freelance graphic designer and very casual booktuber. But I am also answering questions about where my lore started, the new tag that Carrie Can Read created recently. I thought it would be the perfect introduction of my reading taste and where my reading story started, especially in my first couple months of booktube. So I thought it would be very interesting to kind of go through those questions, and I really like the video and I hope you do too. So let's get into it. I am going to zip back to past Lauren and she is going to get into the first questions. I'm, yes, still in bed, but I went and made myself a coffee and came back and sat down to film because I don't think you want to see me before I have a coffee. The first question of this video though is, what's the first book you remember reading by yourself? I was all for those like disc fairy tale books where you could like put the disc into your CD player and it would read the book to you. I loved those. I'll try and find an exact picture of the cover and put it on the screen. I loved one about, I don't even know what it was called, but I know that one of the lines was the raven-haired Rowena. It was about Rowena and her sister, and they had like a magic bracelet or cuff or something. I just loved it so much, and being a graphic designer / illustrator now, I look back and I'm like, oh, me looking at those picture books and the illustrations within them is kind of the genesis of my like love of art and that sort of thing, because I could sit and stare at the illustrations for just days and days. When I was able to move out of like the CD disc reading me books, like so many Australian children, the Rainbow Magic books were my absolute favorite to read by myself. I brought out Lauren the Puppy Fairy because this was my book. She was a moment. Like, look how gorgeous. So cute. I got to the point where I could read one a night and I flew through them. So I had so many of them, and we used to put in like bids on eBay to get them secondhand because they were a bit expensive. Then the ones that we couldn't get, then I would go to my local library and buy them. That continued then when they started making like the thicker ones that have kind of like 3 stories, so it's triple what the just generic Rainbow Magic ones are. This was my favorite. I love the blue. This one was an all-time favorite, and I kept it in like my cubby when I was in year 5. Once my water spilt in it and the spine was a bit damaged, and truly it was like one of the most devastating, like the cover is fully falling off this book, but it was one of the most devastating days of my life when this was damaged. I can see myself keeping these books for forever. Like, look at that. It actually looks a bit like Arlo. Looks a bit like baby Arlo. I'll put his photo on the screen so you can see. And I loved their website as well. I would go on their website on my like really old laptop that you had to plug in for it to work. I made like a folder, a binder, and I drew all of the Rainbow Magic fairies and wrote some like, it's like some of my favorite facts about them. Like, I was just obsessed with all of them. I was very into fairies and fantasy. These books, they're really special to me. And even if I go to a public library now, I go looking for them, which is just so silly, but the nostalgia of these books is kind of what I would want to return to. So yeah, those were the books that kind of like started my lore. I was very much a fantasy, fairies, magic, and all of like the possum magic picture books and that sort of thing. Anything that had cool illustrations, kind of where I got into, but then fairy books, anything magical. I just loved fairies. Those books are very special to me. The next question in the tag is, what character did you most identify with in elementary school? In year 6, when I was about 11, I read Little Women. And this book is probably what got me into reading more solidly. I was reading kind of more of the Rainbow Magic books. They were easy. But then my auntie recommended that I pick up Little Women. This book just took me. I loved all of the characters so much, but I particularly aligned with Beth. She was quiet, introverted, didn't really know how to speak to strangers, and I very much aligned with that when I was little. That has changed since starting a YouTube channel, because now I'm potentially talking to strangers all the time, but they're not talking back to me. I just really aligned with Beth so much. This was my first edition. My eyesight when I was a kid must have been so good because that's how small the text was. And this copy specifically just holds so much nostalgia. I've got about 6 editions of it now. Very much the first book that I really aligned with. Yeah, so I aligned with Beth when it first came out. Since watching the 2019 adaptation as well as the 1994 adaptation, I've come to realize that I'm a little bit of all the characters. I can see myself in every single one of them. I am a writer, which I see myself in Jo, and she's so stubborn and headstrong, and I see a little bit of myself in that. At least I'm self-aware. Meg wants the ideals of having a family, is very maternal, which I see myself in that. Amy is an artist and also a bit stubborn, but headstrong. But Beth is probably the one that I aligned with the most, but I feel as though I have evolved into the other characters as well. They all have like really special places in my heart. I loved that the main guy was called Laurie Lawrence, and Laurie was a nickname of mine, and of course my name's Lauren. So I love this book so much, and it holds a very special place in my heart, and this book is probably the main instigator in me being a really big reader. Definitely where my lore started. I will also put up on the screen some of my favorite books from primary school years and my like childhood to teenage years. Here on the screen right now are the books that I did read and love in my youth to give you a little bit more background. Now, I'm going to clean up my room and get a little bit more ready for the day because I've sat in bed long enough and I need to get ready and started for the day. I'll come back to you with some more questions to be answered. While I do my skincare routine, I thought I would answer the next two questions in our little challenge today. One being, what was your elementary school or primary school comfort book? This is an easy answer because I loved both the Secret Garden and the Anne of Green Gables series. The Anne of Green Gables series was the first one. I think I read the first 4 books. I binged it. That was my first ever binge read. And I sat on this couch. I had a blanket, I had a drink, and I just binged the whole book. I said to my family, don't you dare talk to me. I'm going to binge these books, and I did. And so now they've just been like stuck in my head as comfort series, as well as the Secret Garden. It was one of those books that made me feel things. I don't know what year they were made, but the Anne of Green Gables, the Canadian movies, like the OG Canadian movies, were the best. And by extension, they were my comfort movies. I would borrow them from my auntie and uncle because they had them on DVD. Those were my comfort movies. Gilbert Blythe was like one of the first book boyfriends that I had. But I just loved Anne, like her stubbornness. She stood up for herself in a way that I hadn't seen in books before. I'm going to do the next part of my routine before I dry out to crisp. While I let that soak into the skin, I thought I'd answer the next question, which is, where or what was your safe space as a kid? My favourite reading spot was my childhood bedroom. We lived in another house before we moved to this one, and truly my bedroom was magical. I'll insert some photos. My bookshelves were just like gorgeous, and the rooms were painted yellow, and I just loved it so much. So yeah, that place was where I spent most of my time reading, but also the chair that I told you about earlier, that's cozy, comfy reading spot. Now to drift away from the questions a little bit, I've just put some bronzing drops on because I'm looking rather pale. I got a new makeup product and I thought we'd try it together. It is the Soft Sculpt Bronzing and Shaping Serum by Makeup by Mario. So we're going to try this now. I got shade light medium. And I chose this one because it has a pump as well as a doe foot. That was very easy to blend. I'm going to quickly go do the rest of my makeup and we will see how we go. Okay, so I think that went pretty well. I think I will have to play around with that a little bit more, but I quite like how it's sitting. I have a makeup light on my mirror, which I'm very lucky to have because it makes stuff like this very easy. I do have a bit of eczema up there, so just ignore that. But pretty happy for just a chill out home day, wanting to feel a bit alive. I am just about to sit down and start some freelance work for the day. I thought I would just quickly answer a couple questions before we get into that. So the next question in this little tag is, how has your taste in books changed since childhood? It has changed greatly. I was a fantasy reader, as we can see in the books that I read in my early childhood. I was very into fantasy and things that would spark my imagination. And then I kind of diverted to classics. I went away from the imaginative and fantastical storylines and went more into domestic real life stories like Your Little Women, Secret Garden, Anne of Green Gables, where I could see myself in the characters portrayed in that they loved art or they loved books. Then I kind of strayed from fantasy, but I've since returned to it. I think the next question will tie into what got me back into fantasy, but the young adult series that I was getting in touch with was then more of a fantastical element, and I've then carried that on with a balance with general fiction and contemporary romance and that sort of thing. So it has evolved in that I was very fantastical, went to primarily just normal life classics, and then it kind of returned to fantasy. And the next question very much ties into that. Did you feel inspired to read by your school? And if yes, how did your upbringing encourage reading? My mum's a teacher, so I was always encouraged to read, but my year 6 teachers were really amazing because they got me back into fantasy. But they had this idea of doing a blind date with a book, and every single student in their class got a different book to read. We did tasks on them, but I really can't remember what tasks we did. They gave me Dragon Keeper by Carol Wilkinson, and it's based in ancient China of this young girl that's either given a dragon egg or she stumbles across one, and she then has this dragon buddy to live with. And I just really loved it because it brought magic into a culture that I hadn't explored before, and we had been learning about ancient China in class as well, so I feel like it tied a bit of what we were learning in class to what I was then reading, and I really enjoyed that sort of thing. I subsequently then went and purchased all of the other books in the series because I loved them so much and I was like 10 at the time, and it kind of dipped my toe back into fantasy again after when I was coming of age. I think I lost the magic a little bit. It became being able to return to it through fantasy was really enjoyable, and I think I have now since taken those when I went out and saw stories like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, and then now I think I have a really good balance. So I think it was very influential in bringing me back to fantasy. Sorry if you can hear Miss Bailey scampering behind there. She is my bird, and she generally comes in here when I'm doing freelance work to come and sit with me. She was Avery raised, so she does have a bit of an attitude, but often when I am working, she'll come and like sit on my hand. She only likes me, and even then it's a very love-hate relationship, isn't it, doll? Yeah, so this is Bailey. She's a cockatiel. She's very chatty. She loves love. You'll see her scampering around as I do my work. She loves sitting up here, actually. So yeah, I'm going to get into freelance work, and then I will check back in with you. So I finished my first little project that I was working on for the morning, and I am about to sit down and have a cheeky lunch. I might sit down to read for about 20 minutes while I eat, just so I can get a bit into the book that I'm reading for another video, which you will see very soon, because I am a little bit sick and still a bit stuffy. It's a struggle to get some work done in like a massive amount of time, so this will be a good break before I have to jump back in and spend the rest of the afternoon doing freelance work, which I love to do. But when I've just been unwell and I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather, it can be a bit tricky to hold focus and work to the best of my ability, which I wish I could do, but I'm still a bit down and out. We will get stuck into the work again, and yeah, thought I would check in with you to answer another question. The next question is, what book have you wanted to return to lately? My answer is The Alphabet Sisters by Monica McInerney. That book was the first book that I read that was like adult. My mum had read that book before me, and then she was like, oh, Lauren, you would love this. It has a lot of hype in my head because it was like the nostalgia of reading an adult book, but it just had some really nice messaging about sisterhood. I then went on to read the subsequent books as well because I thought it was just such a good series. The main character's name was Beth, so calling back to the other Beth that we talked about in this video. It was my first kind of foray into women's fiction, romance, that sort of thing, and it just holds a special place in my heart because I felt very adult reading those books. And now, since establishing a whole library of books ranging from middle grade to YA to adult, I want to know if it still holds up the same hype that it does when I was little. When I was younger, not little. It just stuck with me, and it's a book that I've wanted to return to just for the nostalgia of it and returning to the story, because I have forgotten so much. I know that I read it on holiday, but I have forgotten so much of the nitty gritty of the story, and I know that their grandma's name is Lola, and she's like an absolute firecracker. I want to dip my toe back into it because, yeah, it was a really fun read back then, and hopefully it still is. The next question is, what is my favourite or formative YA series? And without a doubt, it is going to be The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. I was convinced to read these by my high school friends. They were very into YA fantasy, and again, I had kind of strayed from there. I think at the time I was reading a lot of John Green. I think Christina Lauren, like Tomorrow When the War Began. Those are the kind of books that I was consuming at that time, and everyone recommended The Infernal Devices to me, and I saved up my pretty pennies. I had an allowance of $6 per week, and I saved up for weeks and weeks to get the box set of the first 3, and I've got the spines that have like the art on them, which just makes me so happy. But this series very quickly became one of my absolute all-time favorites, and I've returned to it like 2 or 3 times because I just love it so much. This series just baroque me, the love triangle, the angst, and I really loved that this book connected me to all of my friends in my grade, and just we established like this mini book club almost because we were so obsessed with this series. This then catapulted me into reading Throne of Glass and Akotar. I read every single book. I think I've owned about 23 or 24 of the Cassandra Clare books. I bawled my eyes out during Tales of the Shadowhunter Academy at school because my friend was like, we were doing a group project and we sat down and my friend's like, you sit, you read, you finish this book because I think you'll need someone with you to finish this book. I'm going to do the group project for now. You just read. I just did nothing and read, which I didn't do often. That's like probably the one time I slacked off, but I will put some more if I think of them within this like era of my life, my like 14, 15-year-old self wanting to read books about angst and fantasy. I just did about an hour and a half straight on freelance work. And like I said before, feeling this sick, it has completely taken all of my energy. So I am going to sit down and have a little break again, just so I can recoup and hopefully punch out some more later on in the day. We are going to address the next question, and it is, what book did I have to read in high school that I actually loved? And to me, that is Hag Seed by Margaret Atwood. I had to read this for my final year, so year 12, and we had to compare it to The Tempest by Shakespeare because it's kind of a modern appropriation, I guess, of the story itself. I really liked this one. You can't see it on the outside, but I highlighted pretty much every single page of quotes that I could use in a future essay, which I then did. And I had an accompanying notebook. I wasn't in the world of tabbing or annotating my books, only highlighting at this point. And each page then had a corresponding note in the notebook about what I thought of that quote and how I would use it in an essay. This one is like well and truly trashed with the amount of highlighting and everything that I did in it. I'll just read you the synopsis because it's been 5 years since I read this book. Toppled from his post as director of a festival on the eve of his production of The Tempest, Felix retreats to a backwoods hovel to lick his wounds and mourn his lost daughter, and also to plot his revenge. After 12 years, his chance appears in the shape of a theatre course at a nearby prison. Here, Felix and his inmate actors will stage his Tempest at last and snare the traitors who destroyed him. But will it remake Felix as his enemies fall? So it's kind of this story of redemption and finding the beauty in people and looking past the prejudices that we may put on other people and seeing their true nature and how art can be a vehicle for that. And I just really loved the story when we studied it in school. I actually really loved reading and going over The Tempest by William Shakespeare. Little tip for anyone that is in high school and is watching this video, hello. I think that the best way to get into a Shakespearean play, find a bootleg or something on YouTube and watch the Shakespeare play be actually performed while you're reading it and annotating it, because it provides so much context. And Shakespeare was written to be performed. It wasn't written to just be read on a page. Maybe sonnets were, but all of his plays should be seen in the form that they were intended to be. And there are so many different productions that you won't need to choose many because they're all going to be out in the open and easy to find. Anyway, that's my little hot tip if you don't like Shakespeare or you can't connect to Shakespeare, but you have to study it in school. The next question is, if your 13-year-old self could live in a fictional world, which would it be? And is it different from the world you'd choose now? My 13-year-old self, she would have most definitely gone into either the Shadowhunter world or the Harry Potter world, but looking back, there's no way I would survive those worlds. I have very little survival instinct. So I don't know. I would love to be part of the Osmanverse. I love Heartstopper so much, and I think that British culture is kind of fun and that sort of thing, so I'd love to be within that culture. Maybe meet Nick and Charlie, maybe be friends with them, to witness a queer love story like that. Beautiful. Where else would I be? Basically anything within a contemporary setting that's not fantastical that I won't die in. Maybe the Legends and Lattes world, because that's very low stakes, and I would love to experience having coffee for the first time. I think that would be so fun. Maybe the Atlas 6, although sometimes I think maybe I would be the one killed off. Any environment that's fantastical, but it's either academic or the night circus, where it's fairly low stakes for the people that aren't the magicians, that sort of thing, where I wouldn't have to be using my own survival instincts, but I'm still within this world that holds such magic. Or in the case of the Atlas 6, something academic. But yeah, I think those are the books that I can see myself going into now. 13-year-old Lauren was very delusional in that she thought she could survive the world. She thought she was indestructible. I would have been the first one dead. I would have been that person that has one line and then you look at them and you're like, oh, you're going to die soon, aren't you? And yep, demon's bitten her and she's died, doesn't know how to draw the right runes, or fell out of the train. I am going to get stuck into reading and chilling out because my throat hurts and I just want to read. I'm going to put a 30-minute timer on and allow myself about 30 minutes to just chill out, and then I have to go back and do some more work. But this is the day in the life of a stay-at-home freelance graphic designer / YouTuber. But that's what I signed up for. I am just about to sit down and start editing the very video that you're watching right now by breaking the fourth wall a little bit. I normally edit on my laptop, but it has run out of space. And while I start clearing my laptop, I need to be editing on my iMac, which is a godsend. I actually think it'll be better on my posture, eyes, everything to be editing on this. The raw footage is already 1 hour and it's not even done yet. Just one day in my life has amounted to over 1 hour of footage and just answering some silly questions for you. To put it simply, that 1 hour of rambling, it's going to be condensed to whatever time you're seeing on the screen now. There is a massive disparity in how much I film to how much actually goes out to the world. I didn't realize how much I fill my sentences and just like ramble and talk nonsense. There's a little peek behind the curtain on how much I actually ramble as opposed to how much goes out. I thought I would answer a cheeky question for you before I start. I'm just pulling up the list on my iMac, so bear with me 1 second. Without realizing it, we're actually at the final question. Is there a newly released book that you wish you had when you were younger? To be totally honest with you, I have absolutely no idea. So I'm going to go through Storygraph and just have a cheeky browse because I don't know what I would have wanted or needed to read when I was younger. Nope, you know what? I have the answer to it. It's very easy. I wish that contemporary romances like Out on a Limb, Out of the Woods, the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert, Get a Life Chloe Brown, Take a Hint Danny Brown, and Act Your Age Eve Brown, the Silly Romances by Emily Henry and Ali Hazelwood. I wish I had read those a little bit younger than I did. I'm 21 now. I wish I'd read them when I was a little bit younger, not too much younger, or more like wholesome YA romances. I wish they were in my hands earlier because I read some books that did not model very good relationships. I read After when I was way too young to be reading it and other things. I can't even think off the top of my head, different Wattpad stories, which my brain wasn't developed enough to realize that a lot of those stories were romanticized or not really relationships that you want to be reading or consuming when you're that young, when you are taking in so much and you're still a sponge and you're taking in romances that are dysfunctional and unhealthy. So I wish I had more romances that were healthy, but also it's only my own fault because I was picking up those books. But to be fair, I don't think it damaged me too much. I think I got to the point where I look back and I'm like, I really shouldn't have been reading those. And what my friends were like, we were like fangirling over these characters and I'm like, no, they're actually horrid. They're horrible people. My younger self was sensationalizing the idea of a romance. But anyway, I'm going to go edit this vlog. I'll still take you on the last kind of bits of my day to close out this vlog, but yeah, those are the questions done. Thank you for listening to me ramble about myself. So I've taken my makeup off and we are basically ending the vlog where we started, but not yet because I'm on the phone. He's looking at me funny. I'm on the phone to my boyfriend. We call every night because we are in a long distance relationship, unfortunately. Part of like the evening routine and ritual is that we talk on the phone. And I thought, what better way to meet him? A day in my life vlog is part of my daily life. What do you want to say to the people?
Hello, YouTube nations.
Austin, what was your favorite book growing up?
Oh, you should have asked me this before you asked me. Ready now.
Okay, we're Betty. We're back and we're ready. What was your favorite book growing up?
My favorite book was Harry Potter.
What's been your favorite? I love that we just did a little impromptu Q&A. What is your favorite book of ours that we've read together?
Well, it's a series, not just a particular book. The First Aid Motor Club series. I mean, who can go past Richard Osman's magnificent spellbinding books?
And just for the record, I gave Austin the Thursday Motor Club as a present and then we read it together. So thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. Austin reads about 16,000 books at one time. Can you please tell me about one book that you're reading right now?
Firstly, highly offended. It's the Benjamin Stevenson double book where you can have two books in one. I've read one of these so far, the Find Us book. Currently reading the last one, Tilly.
Say bye to the people.
Bye, YouTube Nation.
I don't know if any of that is usable. No, I don't know if the audio is good, is what I'm trying to say. He just hung up on me because he was offended. But if the audio was shit, I'm just entertain us. Him and I have been together for almost 2 years and I love him. He's gonna have a little tantrum about the fact that I don't know if I'm gonna be able to use this in a video. All in jest. I'm going to finish talking to Austin. We normally talk for like 2 hours. Sometimes get some reading done if he has uni work or something to do, but I don't know if that's the case for tonight. So I am just going to call him for as long as we can call. I think I'm going to need an early night. So we'll see how we go, but I will check in with you before I go back to bed. I promise you that. I am about to go to sleep. I am exhausted, but thank you so much for spending the day with me and getting to know a little bit more about me. Let me take my glasses off and what got me into reading and the many, many books that follow. I hope you want to stick around. If you do, please like and subscribe. Hopefully, you know a little bit more about me and that you enjoyed the day that we spent together. Please let me know your childhood favorites in the comments because I love hearing about this stuff. I will see you next time. Enjoy your week.